Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Pat and the Choice family. I really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. They asked me to spend 12 minutes to give you the state of the US hotel industry. So let's rock and roll. Before I do, thank you for being signed up to the STR report. That pays my paycheck. Thank you. I appreciate that. So, as you may have heard, the first quarter was kind of a little iffy, right? Not so great, a little bit disappointing maybe. So I thought I'd sort of cut my presentation into two halves, talk about things to like and, well, things to ponder, maybe. So let's start with what's to like. The 12 months ending in March, we've had more rooms available than ever, sold more rooms than ever, generated more rooms revenue than ever, had the highest ADR occupancy RevPAR ever recorded. That's amazing, right? That's you. So that's spectacular. Let's look at what the actual data looks like. So I'm starting out here with the KPIs. Supply growth and demand growth is what drives everything. And what you're seeing here is that demand growth is outpacing supply growth. So check this out. We are 9 years into this upcycle, and we're driving room demand growth of almost 2.5%. 9 years into the cycle. That's amazing. I don't know where these people come from, but we'll take them. So room supply growth is very well understood, 2%. It's basically the long run average of 35 years is actually 2%. So we're not going to overbuild in this cycle. And because demand growth is outpacing supply growth, what that means then is that occupancy is increasing. Not a lot, but it's increasing a little bit. But again, we're at the highest level ever, selling 2 out of 3 rooms every night for a year in a row. And if you know, as you know, that Sunday is a 50% night, 50% occupancy night, that means that you're pretty full, more full on Tuesday, Wednesday, when the business traveler is traveling, and Friday, Saturday, when the leisure traveler is on the road. And what that gives you then is pricing power, right? Well-ish, right? So room rates are up, 2.1%, which isn't bad, it's just not great, given these high demand and occupancies levels that we have reported. Let me give you the long view here, back to the beginning of time, according to our founder, Randy Smith, which is 1990. And what I'm showing you here is the interplay between occupancy growth and ADR growth. Basically, how does our utilization impact our pricing? Or maybe it's the other way around, right? How does our pricing impact our utilization? You can see that every time there's a recession, when GDP contracts, so does our occupancy. Occupancy declines, and then with it come room rate declines as well. But we're also very good at rebounding, right? When things are great, everybody's saying, I want to get away. And when things are terrible, people are saying, oh, it's terrible, I want to get away. So they just continue to rebound. Our demand continues to rebound, and we continue to see the highest occupancy ever. On the far right-hand side of the chart, you see the interplay of ADR growth and occupancy growth. And it's basically occupancy growth is not a whole lot, just because we're at the highest level ever. And ADR growth is, well, it's growing, but at a slower trajectory. And it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out throughout the year. So you take supply and demand, that makes occupancy, and then occupancy and ADR together makes RevPAR. So what I'm showing you here is the RevPAR percent change by month. We have seen 9 consecutive years of RevPAR growth. It's amazing, right? Cycles are supposed to last 7 years, and we're 9 months into this cycle. And I don't expect that really to change. Our forecast of RevPAR growth is for this year to be positive and for next year to be positive. So we will easily surpass the prior record of 111 months that we had in the mid-1990s. So we expect smooth sailing. It's a little bumpy in the top 25 markets and a little bit bumpy in some of the select service categories, but overall, smooth sailing going forward. Especially when I look at this chart. This is the first quarter occupancy by class, most of the classes that you are represented in, and you're seeing that we're selling 6.5, almost 7 out of 10 rooms in upscale and upper mid-scale, and the extended stay sector is just on fire. Almost selling 72% on an annualized basis, almost 7.5 out of 10 rooms for the full year. So that sector is doing really, really well. So there's a lot to like on the occupancy side. And then the other thing that's to like is basically construction, the pipeline, is not a big concern. We currently count roughly 200,000 or so rooms under construction. That number's up 7.5% or so. But again, we're not super worried about that. The prior high was 215,000 rooms in the middle of 2007. So you see that the percent changes for planning and final planning, they're pretty big, but they're also extremely erratic. So I wouldn't put too much stock into these numbers suddenly rapidly coming out of the gate and us overbuilding. I don't think we're going to do that this cycle. So there's a lot to like. Highest demand ever, highest occupancy ever. Occupancies by scale very high, and pipeline not a big deal. So let's talk about the other piece. We have this saying at STR that you may have in your own company: if you massage the data long enough, it'll confess to anything. So what I'm going to show you now is basically exactly the same data, just, different. So what I'm doing here, number one, is I'm doing a little bit of fuzzy math. I'm creating real ADR growth. I just showed you the top line ADR growth. What I'm doing here is I'm creating real ADR growth, and what economists mean by that is you take out CPI, the Consumer Price Index, the rate of inflation, right? But how much do things get more expensive? So you can see how much your top line grows. And as an industry, we've always loved inflation. We're always able to outpace inflation. In the 90s, we were able to grow our ADR of 4.5% on top of CPI. Post 9/11, over 5% on top of CPI. In the mid-2010s, we were able to grow ADR by between 3.5% and 4% on top of CPI. Until, well, so on the right-hand side, it's really hard to see because it's so small. There is actually data there, and it's negative. And what that means is for Q3 last year, Q4 last year, and Q1 of this year, the ADR increase was less than CPI growth, than the Consumer Price Index increased. And as you may have heard or seen, in March, room rates in the US only increased 0.6%. So why is this a problem? Obviously, if you drive your top line not as much as your expenses grow, that hits your profitability. And a lot of this is around one topic, right? Labor. I'm based in Nashville, and we have a ton of cranes, and a lot of you are building there. Thank you very much for making our town awesome. And what I tell developers in Nashville across the United States, I have no doubt that we can plan the rooms, that we can finance the rooms, and that we can build the rooms. But who is going to clean the rooms? That's the question. The Bureau of Labor Statistics tells us they count over 1 million, close to 1 million open positions in accommodations and food service. And you see that line is going up. We have a real problem with finding people, and you saw that the pipeline is only up 7% or so. We have 200,000 rooms, but all those rooms need to be cleaned as well, right, when they open. So what does that mean for you? Well, it means, again, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, if you look at wage growth for hourly earnings of production and non-supervisory employees, so your line-level employees, those wages are up, what, 3.5%, almost 4%? Oh, but ADR grew only 0.6%. So that can't be good. That is not sustainable. We either have to figure out how to make more money or how to figure out labor costs and how to keep other costs in check. What else is going on? Well, I talked about the pipeline not really being a big issue, but it turns out a lot of you have been super busy. So we're seeing a lot of new supply in upscale, upper mid-scale, and in the extended stay sector. What I'm showing you here on this chart is it's the makeup of RevPAR growth. So RevPAR growth, as you know, is components ADR growth and occupancy growth. And what you're seeing here is that the occupancy percent change for a lot of the scales is actually decreasing, because new supply is very, very healthy. Demand growth is there as well. It's just the supply growth is outpacing the demand growth. And then that gives you very, very limited pricing power to the tune of around 1% or so, or even 0 on the economy side. What's good about the economy piece is actually that a lot of independent, non-flagged economy properties actually be taken out of inventory, because the highest and best use of that piece of real estate might be, I don't know, self-storage or so. So the economy sector is actually doing really, really well. Now, to add to that, as I said, you've been very busy. When I look at the 201,000 rooms in the pipeline, what I'm seeing is that 7 out of 10 of those rooms are limited or select service, right? Upscale, upper mid-scale, that's where the action is. You know, that's why you're on these seats. You love them, consumers love them, developers love them, bankers love them, but we're seeing a pretty large influx of that into the US hotel industry going forward. So, that all said, here's our forecast for this year and for next year. Not a big surprise, I don't think. Supply and demand growth are in balance at around 2%, and what that means is basically that occupancy change is 0. So all RevPAR growth has to come from ADR growth, and that's really up to you. And then we're suggesting that RevPAR growth this year is 2.3%. Actually, for this year, STR, we are the bears in this scenario. Our friends from CBRE and PwC are actually suggesting more pricing power for this year than 2.3%. I hope they're right. You can make them right. And then for next year, it's basically exactly the same story, right? Supply and demand basically in balance, and all RevPAR growth comes from ADR growth. So that concludes sort of the formal part of my presentation. I have something that's totally not related, but it's really cool. So I was at a data visualization conference at Vanderbilt in Nashville, and you're thinking, nerd, and yes. And the professor at the end said, hey, there's a free software on the interwebs, you should check it out. And one of the software pieces he gave us was this platform that allows you to plot locations over time. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, because we have pretty sweet hotel database, as hotel databases go, and we have open dates. So what I can show you is globally the brand proliferation and hotel proliferation since 1970. So the brands are in blue, the independents are in orange. Let's roll this. So what I'm showing you here basically is you see in the 1970s, it's a lot of blue in North America, you know, mostly branded. You see in Europe, it's a lot of independents, and there's not a lot of activity in Asia Pac, a little bit in Australia, but really nothing going on in Africa, a little bit in Latin America. In the mid-80s then, the brands are expanding from North America into Canada, into Mexico, and then the recession of 1991 hits, and there's a slight hiccup, but you see that the brands then re-emerge, and bankers really like them, and the brands want to have a global footprint, and so they're moving into Europe, and we're now seeing some more activity in Asia, in China, and in Japan. 9/11 happens, just a short hiccup, but that really then put fuel in the fire, and after that there was a lot of money available, and you're seeing now the global brands from the United States are pushing into Europe, the European brands are pushing further south, and you're seeing a lot of activity in Middle East, and in Asia, and in Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, the future is branded. That was fun. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Jan, great job. Thank you for that enlightening and entertaining presentation. Why do you think the trend to branding has been so prolific in the last several decades?
Other than it looks great on a chart, probably because you have a promise, right? A brand promise that independent properties just can't deliver. And more importantly, maybe than that, you have a frequent stay program, a loyalty program that really connects you with the customer.
Great. Now, before you go, what parting advice would you provide to our franchisees to help them be successful in 2019?
You're running probably the highest occupancies ever. So the time to invest in your property is now. Thank you.
Well, it's great to understand the macro picture. For more insights, be sure to check out Jan's column in Hotel News Now. Thanks, Jan.
Thank you.